Selma was an inspiring movie. I was definitely inspired to make a change, and it showed me the power in numbers and actually getting out to the community and helping them make an effective change.
It was very inspiring, and it was like almost like an emotional roller coaster. It was like there were times that are happy, and there were times that really made me want to cry.
Well, we're so fortunate to have artists who care about the history of our country, the history of the African American experience, to bring it to life for our students to be able to have, a more, rich perspective, if you will, about what they're learning in school, when it's typically delivered in sometimes a dry curriculum, but they're taking the lessons from the past and being better adults than we ever were. So, a movie like this gives them an opportunity to do that, an opportunity to talk to the actors and the creators and the genius behind this movie. I just think brings it to life for them in ways that we will forever touch them in wanting to learn about this part of American history. So we're so thankful and appreciative today for Atlanta Public Schools, and just thank you to all the people that made it possible.
Hey, this is Paul Garnes, executive producer of Selma. One of the best audience for this film is the youth. I think that the civil rights movement was really powered by the youth. There's a group in the film called SNCC that was organized by college students to right the injustices happening in the 60s. And I think that there is an absolute place for you as kids to find a voice and find creative ways to express that voice, to make a difference and to change what you don't like about what we're doing or what is going on in the country. And between voting and between petitions and social media, there's so many different ways to express your point of view that you kind of owe it to yourself and you owe it to your friends to do that and feel empowered to do that. And I hope that this movie, Selma, gives that impression and inspires you to do that.
And then, of course, our Congressman, John Lewis. These are not people who are just part of history. They made history. And they are people you can see and touch literally almost every day because they're very active in the community. The other thing I wanted to mention to you are the 4 little girls. I don't know how many of you have been to the Center for Civil and Human Rights. If you haven't been, I'd like for you to get your parents to take you there, because there you will see the stained glass windows that have been done in commemoration of those little girls. So even though this is history, it is still current. It is still real. And to those of you who are coming upon the age of 18 and you haven't thought about registering to vote, this movie lets you know why it's important for you not only to register to vote, but be informed on the issues and then to vote intelligently. Too many people died, too many people suffered, and are still wearing those scars so that you could have the right to vote and determine your future. So now we're going to get into our discussion area. These are some pivotal moments in American history. How many of you really enjoyed the movie? Let me hear. Yes, I'm glad. I want all of you to write down your questions because we're going to have Q&A. Please line up over here by the microphone. And to whom you want to direct your questions, please put that name, and I'm going to give you their names right now. The roll call. I need to find out. Where are my students from Booker T. Washington High School? Okay. Where are the ladies from Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy? You saw, I just thought that Coretta came across so real and so true. And last but not least, where are the 8th graders from Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School? That's a lively group. Now I'm going to introduce our panelists to you. Starting with Atlanta Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Maria Karstoffen, who is also a native of Selma, Alabama. Dr. Karstoffen, I'm going to take just a side here. Who was Edmund Pettus?
I actually don't know.
I have never heard.
There's actually a scene that isn't in the movie that we had to cut for time, but he is actually the former leader of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, now that's a bit of information we needed to know. Now, who is this gentleman? Well, of course, I've got to go back to the other side of my sheet. Mr. Paul Garnes, who is Selma's executive producer. Give him a round of applause. Mrs. Viola Jackson was played by actress Charity Jordan. And by the way, she lives right here in Atlanta. Atlanta, woo! And last but not least, Tara Oates, who plays Mrs. Viola Liuzzo in the film Selma. And you also live here in Atlanta. That was one of the interesting things, I think, during the movie, seeing all the sights that were Atlanta. Okay, it's time to start our question and answer. Who's going to be my first question? Did you write it on a card? You didn't? Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make it work. If you have a question, young man, stand up. Come on, hurry up. Move out. We're gonna get this going. Microphone's right there. Please give us your name, and since you were first, ask the question and direct it to one of our panelists, please.
Hi, my name is Izzy Al-Khalid. I'm awesome. I have a question for Mr. Paul, if you don't mind. I want to know, why didn't you include Miss Coretta Scott King more as an activist in the movie? So
there has never been a movie, believe it or not, where Dr. Martin Luther King has been the protagonist. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But in our movie, it really isn't about Dr. King. It's really about the 3 months between him winning the Nobel Peace Prize in January and the march to Montgomery. So we really only focused on that piece. All of those characters have a much broader story and how they relate to the movement as a whole, but we were just focused on the Selma March.
Next question, please.
Hi, my name is Jovanay Carter. My question is directed to Mr. Garnes. And I want to know, I know since you produced this movie that you have to know a lot about the history and how it ties into the modern day. So being in that position, what do you think that we as, teenagers now, how should we protest, guys getting shot like the boy did in the movie?
Sure. So everybody knows what happened in Ferguson, right? So when we made this movie, we finished shooting this movie in July of last year. So it was before the events in Ferguson. It was before the events in New York. But, Ferguson and New York weren't the first time that something like that had happened in society. It's been going on since those days and before. It's interesting that there's these parallels between what's happening now and what happened then, but really it's something that's just been ongoing, and the conversation has just gotten so far away from what happened 50 years ago. I don't think people remembered the marches that were happening, or Jimmy Lee Jackson, which was the young man that was killed by the police in Selma. That Charity played his mother, so I'm gonna let her chime in too on this. But I think that for us, when we made the movie, we weren't looking at it from the standpoint of how it relates today, because it wasn't in the popular culture conversation, but it was something we felt still needed to be dealt with, and it just kind of all aligned that people started marching again. People weren't marching like that until Ferguson. So it's just one of those things that I think came together.
Yeah, I played Jimmy's mom in the movie, and I think what's ironic is that every movement in any culture or country has always been led by youth. So if you look at what happened with apartheid in South Africa, if you look at what happened in civil rights, with the freedom rides, it's always been a youth component or a young adult component. And so you have so much power because you have so much time on your hand and so little responsibility right now that you can be active on a regular basis. And so I think what's most important to think about is what matters to you. What cause can you commit your life to service to, and how you will serve that, and then getting involved in however you can, whether that's doing something on the weekends or volunteering and raising money, but all your efforts help, because every change that's happened in society has been really led by the commitment of youth. So hopefully you're being active. And
one more thing, the cool thing I liked about what was shown in the movie was that it wasn't just an arbitrary movement. There were really specific goals, and they really focused on what they wanted out of it. And I think that would be, like, if you had something to take away today, obviously, clearly, there's still a motivation and a will to march. I would say that, we definitely need to focus down on what is it that we want? What are our goals, and then are we accomplishing those goals?
I think the other part of that, just to throw it in, when you talk about having a focus, you also notice that they all had a very strong faith. And then that faith led them into what we're talking about as fellowship, because unless you join together as a group and work, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And that in turn brings about what we call favor, which is the change of everything that happened. Our next questioner.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Ashley, and my question is for the superintendent. Were you impacted by the racial division? Were you impacted by the racial divide/tension in Selma growing up? If so, how?
Yeah, so good afternoon, APS students. It's so great to see you guys. I love you. I want to apologize first for my seatmate because I was crying the whole time and distracting her considerably. And part of the reason why it's so emotional, as someone who grew up there, I went to public schools there, I graduated from Selma High School, and my parents still live there. My Uncle George is kind of mayor. So, it's very emotional because the segregation and the division that you see back in the 1960s, some 20 plus years later, when I was in high school, like our Washington students, was still alive and well. We had private white academies, some still exist today, for the separation in education. Overwhelmingly, I think today, the high school and the public school system is almost 100% African American. And when I was in school, while it was more mixed, we still struggled with things like black and white proms. We still struggled with things like what they called tracking in school, where based on your ability, which was determined when you were very young in elementary school, that you would kind of get on a track that was either college bound or vocationally bound, and you were stuck forever in those designs. And so when I would go to school and go to class, I might be one or two of the black students in the class, and everybody else would be white. And that was in the late 80s. When my little sisters, who are younger than me, were still in high school, the racial tension increased so dramatically over the superintendent and some of the community's effort to break down that system of what was kind of resegregating the schools. And as a result, the National Guard was called back again in the 90s to try to manage some of the tensions that were emerging between adults and some of the students. So, you know, for me, it is, while yes, I understand the movie was set in the 60s at a very pivotal time in our country's history, when you were living there every day and what was arguably what we would consider more modern times after the movement, it had not moved as much as one might think. And so as young people growing up in that, it was very hard. It made you kind of tough about some issues, and you grew up really fast with a lot of adult-minded thinking about how people relate to each other. And some of it wasn't healthy, and some of it was liberating. And so thank goodness I had parents who put me on the liberating side and really tried to help me make sense of that. So when I went into education, I could be the kind of superintendent I am today. And I don't think that would have been possible without living what I saw growing up in Selma. So it was hard, but it made me a better person, and I think it's made me the best leader I could have possibly hoped to be in public education.
Our next questioner.
My name is Brianna, and my question is open to the panel. Do you guys believe there is equity in education in 2015?
Is there equity in education in 2015?
Hands down, of course. Of course. So I'm from, like, I live in Atlanta, but I'm from Atlanta, okay? So I went to Tri-Cities High School, Camp Creek Middle School. So I am really from Atlanta, American Deli and all, okay? We can talk about that later. But education is the one thing that you have that you really can control right now. And it's the thing that will push you to the next level. It's the only thing that breaks down cycles of poverty, cycles of mistreatment, is education. And so I think the equity that you guys are investing now, so it depends on what you invest, right? So equity is about what you invest, because then it'll grow, right? It makes more off on the return. But it depends on what you put in. I think you guys are at such a great place. I was looking at your faces like, man, what was I doing in middle school? And who was I going with in middle school? I was trying to remember all those things, and I couldn't. But I do remember that it was a decision I had to make about what the next part of my life looked like as far as education. And it really started around this middle school time, where I had to decide who I was going to hang with, what classes I was going to commit to doing, and that opened the door for college and for high school, things that weren't available if I didn't make certain choices educationally. So I just want to put that out there, that I know it can be a little abstract to think about what your future looks like. Like, yeah, I'll graduate, yeah, I'll go to college, but it's really what you invest now and how much you commit to your education now that'll make the biggest difference. So I hope that you guys really, really are committed to that investment.
So I work here every day in Atlanta Public Schools. I am only recently the superintendent for our district, about 6 months ago. And part of the reason I came to Atlanta and left my other job was because of some of the inequities that had been surfaced about what was happening for children in one of the greatest American cities and the greatest southern city in our country. And so I do think, depending on how you define equity, and in my world, we define it as the kind of decision-making, like doing strategic decision-making that rights past wrongs and puts every child on a pathway for success. And what is disturbing about what's happened in the past in Atlanta Public Schools and what will continue to happen in our future if we don't address it is that every child, those who need it the most and have been underserved the most, should get the greatest, and at the same time, lift all boats for all children. And I don't see that in our schools. I see children who don't all have playgrounds. I see schools where some don't get supplies. I see teachers in working conditions that make it almost impossible to teach. I see food as options for you at lunch that I wouldn't eat. You don't want to eat either, right? I see things about what has happened to you. Well, I've seen things that have happened to you. We have the largest testing cheating scandal in the country that some of you are still working through, and some of your siblings will forever be affected by. And what I came here to do was address those inequities. And I want the very best for you. And make no mistake, there are Jim Clarks alive and well all over this country, all over our school system, and even in some of your classrooms. There are bullies everywhere. Right? And what we have to fight against are those people who allow these kinds of inequities to continue for children generation after generation. So I see inequities for you that must be fixed. And because we love you and we care about you, we must take effective action to change those outcomes for your generation. You have my commitment to do that, and I love you, and I'm going to need your help with some of those bullies in school. But also, we need to think about those adults who could be helping us make a better pathway for you. So we do have inequities in APS, and I think we have a lot of work to do to address those. But I know that I have some board members here today that have been elected to support you. I think Byron Amos and Leslie Grant were here. We also have one of our labor leads, Alan Lee, who's here, who wants to ensure that we address these things for you and for the staff that support you. So APS has a lot of work to do, but you've got a lot of committed people fighting for you on your behalf.
But I have one thing to add to that. It doesn't matter if she gives you a road to follow if you're not willing to hoe the road. If you aren't willing to put in the work, if you aren't willing to not care about what your friends say because you're speaking correct English, if you're not worried about how I look versus what's in my head, it will do no good for Dr. C to make everything right for you, and you choose not to follow the path. In the end, it's what you do with what you have that makes you what you are. I can't make you be a good student. She can't make you be a good student. You can't be a victim anymore, because in the years of segregation, we made it. We had to. But it was dedication, knowing that education was our passport to the future. So, Dr. Karstarfin, I believe very strongly in what you say, but I also believe that our children have got to realize we can't give it to you, you have to earn it. Our next questioner, please.
My name is Armani, and this is for anybody on the panel. My question is, do you believe the same way protests advocate changed in 1950 can still work in 2015?
Can we have Miss Viola answer that from in the movie? Because as a Southern white woman, you have been through many of the changes.
That's right, actually I have, and I didn't, growing up, I don't think I even realized that the changes were happening. And that I was still surrounded by racism. I think it's kind of easy to look the other way, especially as a white person, because you don't feel personally that you are racist. And you can look at all the nice people you know and all your good black friends and think everything's fine, but it's not. And there are things out there that need to be changed still. And I think that it's kind of daunting because maybe it's a little bit more subtle. Reverend H.K. Matthews spoke this weekend about, and he used the word subtle. It's not as obvious anymore. There's not a man in a white sheet on a horse with a bat. There's more subtle ways in which racism is occurring in our country. But I think we can still look to Dr. King and his band of brothers for guidance. There's no question. Light begets light, and dark begets dark. He said to go forward with love and nonviolence. But he also asked for us to speak up and to do something about it. What can I do to change things? So guys, your voices matter and your opinions matter, and you've got people here that want to hear them. And so there's no shame in speaking up. That's what we ask of you today, and that's what Dr. King asks of us, is to speak up, to speak out, and to approach it first with love. And I think that's what Selma says too.
Tara Oates, thank you. Would anybody else like to address that?
Yeah, you know, I know in your question you were asking, like, is there a place for protest still? And I think there is, but I think one of the major points of this film is that the reason that they marched and protested is because they didn't really, from a voter standpoint, have a voice. There wasn't a way to effectively change law. And I know for everyone here who doesn't vote, it seems a little nebulous to have that conversation. But I think one of the challenges we have nowadays is that we don't necessarily use the system the way it should be used. I mean, if you guys watch the news, after every election, they talk about how low the voter turnout is. And a lot of things happen. There are laws that are being changed that were enacted in this movie. Parts of the voter right laws that Lyndon Johnson pushed and Congress passed are being altered today in some of the southern states. If we're not careful, there will be things that limit our rights that will cause us to only have protest as a way to deal with it. Right now, we can still go vote. We can still affect change. We can, we have members of Congress. We have members of our local city councils that effectively change the laws that affect us. But that communication, it happens in the voting booth. So it's very important that if you take something away from here, is really understand that process and take advantage of it, because that's what they were marching for. And we should not be marching for the same thing since they did get it passed.
Charity?
Yeah, I want to say one thing about a way to be active, for activism even now, because I know you guys aren't at voting age quite yet, but you still can be activists in the community. So wave your hand if you thought it was a good movie. Okay, good. Keep your hand up if you were happy to see people that look like you on screen. Right? It's nice to see people that look like you, your shade, your color, your hair, your shape, to look on screen, right? I was really so excited to see that come into the film. Raise your hand if you were glad to see a story about us, about our history, about our past, right? So a way that you can be a cultural activist now is that you support films like Selma in the box office, in theaters, because economics, this is an economic country. The United States is a place that's run off money, okay? And so if you think about now, how do I make differences now? Your economic dollar has a big power pull on what is produced, what he can get funded, what can be made and shown on big screens. And so you can be an activist now in your own way by saying, you know what, I'm not gonna get the bootleg of this one. I'm gonna come see it in theaters. And I know that can be a little like, yeah, but it's more convenient to watch it at home, and my mom, I know all those things. But if we wanna continue to see people that look like us on the screen and our stories told, we have to support it in an economic way. We have to be economic protesting right now by coming to see it. So I just wanna give you that tidbit, because power is in your hand even as youth to make a difference. If you're not seeing a playground or a toilet tissue or whatever in your school that you should have, you can say something about that. You can make a petition and say, look, for 4 days in a row, this is my own little activist when I was in school, for 4 days in a row, I had to wait to get toilet tissue before I go to the bathroom. That's a civil rights I should have every day at Camp Creek Middle School. But I got people to sign it until we made a difference. So just give little tidbits of things that you can do to be activists right now where you are. You do have a lot of power, so I hope that you use it.
Our next question, please.
My name is Naya. This question is for the superintendent. What lesson did growing up in Selma teach you about life yourself and what you wanted to achieve in life?
I could hardly hear you. Speak in the mic. You got such a beautiful voice, and I know you talk a lot in school. So get up in that mic so we can all hear you.
What lesson did growing up in Selma teach you about life yourself and what you wanted to achieve in life?
I think my lesson was to have courageousness in the face of adversity, and to always just stand up for what I felt like was right, do it in respectful ways, but be firm. And I told y'all, I mean, there's bullies everywhere. And what's really hard about, the opportunities that we've had, like my generation and the generations a little older than me, between the time of civil rights and young people like you today, is that some people have really benefited from the system. They actually have been able to use their right to vote, to get the jobs they want, to be in positions to make a difference, and then they don't. Right? There's nothing, what taught me in that experience is that sometimes, you remember that scene when they're talking to the president and they had other black folks in town, it sounded like, that were calling and letting them know when Martin Luther King was going to be out of town? Did I get that right? You got it right. So when we turn on each other, that's a different kind of darkness. That means you've been able to be somewhere where you could make a difference and you're choosing not to. And I think what I learned growing up there is that right is right. When you do the right thing at the right time for the right reason, it may be hard and people may try to punish you, but you know what? You wake up in the morning and you can, if you're a gentleman, shave your face and be proud. As a lady, put on your blush and feel good about yourself. You can look at yourself in the eye and never regret who you are. And for me, that's made me a fearless person. So I don't mind standing up to some of the bullies. I don't mind trying to make right past wrongs. And I certainly don't lose sleep over doing right by you. So know that growing up there and growing up in Atlanta, you can walk away with a similar sense of self-worth and self-awareness that you can take with you wherever you go.
Very nice. Our next question, please.
My name is Charity, and this question is for Monica Pierce.
Yes, ma'am.
Get in that mic, though.
You got to say your name directly in the mic and loud if you're going to say it. That's a nice name you got.
My name is Charity, and this question is for Monica Pierce. How do you exhibit the spirit of Coretta Scott King in daily life?
I think her honesty, her faithfulness, and always believing that you're not here to benefit from what you do, that what you do is to help others, that your whole purpose in life is really to take what you have to give to others to help them improve their lives. That is what Coretta Scott King did. She kept the home fires burning. She made sure her children were educated and aware, and she supported her husband. She was an activist in the civil rights movement, and she never gave up. She never lost hope. She might have had moments as Dr. King did, and that's what I loved about the movie too. We always see him painted as this wonderful man who's in charge of everything, but even he had moments of weakness and would need the help of others. And if Dr. King could ask for help from others, we too can do the same thing. And Coretta Scott King was a courageous woman. It was a joy to get to know her. Next question.
My name is Brianna. In your opinion, this is for the superintendent. Okay, in your opinion, how can students in Atlanta public school decrease the racial divide in our city?
Wow, good question.
Students addressing the racial divide in the city. First and foremost, you have to get an education, right? I'm talking, knowledge is truly power. And those who are smart up here, I mean, I'm also a fan of Aristotle. Martin Luther King reminds me of Aristotle, but to educate the head without educating the heart is no education at all. But both ways, you must get your education. So I'm gonna ask you this, and I need you to really be honest. How many of you plan on graduating on time? That means start in the 9th grade, finish in 12th grade. That's not all the hands. That scares your superintendent. How many of you are gonna graduate on time from high school? You too? All right, okay. That's step number one. That's step number one. Step number two is that what we're learning is that while the world continues to be more globally in the way that it interacts, everything from the World Wide Web to, China becoming the #1 English-speaking country in the world and, having, more AP students and America Has students kinds of stuff, you're gonna have to get your mind really tight to be able to do those kinds of things. Because this will be, and still already is emerging as, a global city. Look at our airport. It is the busiest airport in the world. So when I say get your education, you have to graduate on time and move on. No dilly-dallying. Go on to college or go ahead and start your career. To me, it makes no difference. I want you to be prepared, ready for college and career, right? So if you want to address the racial divide, and if you really want to do something for the city of Atlanta, I'm going to still start of her words and I'm going to finish it for you. A quality education, right, can break the cycle of poverty. It can break the cycle of ignorance. It can break the cycle of violence. It can break down those things that continue to feed the divide in Atlanta. So the more educated this community becomes, the smarter you are about the decisions you make. When you go in there to cast your vote at 18 and on, you can change this city for the better. And you don't have to wait until you have to vote. You heard of many, many different, y'all are all into the internet. You know, all kinds of campaigns can start everywhere from YouTube to Facebook and so on and so forth. So you have more tools available to you than they ever had, than I ever had. So get your education, right? Do the hard stuff too. No naughtiness. Work with a pure heart. Y'all know what I mean. I taught middle school. I know what shenanigans you sometimes get up to. So what I'm saying is put it to good work, and that's how you change. That's how you address the racial divide. And people will not change if they're not educated. And in this city, this majority African-American city, right, education is our Achilles heel. We have really slipped in that area. So you have to do this part for yourself, for your siblings, and for your own families when you start them, okay? But you have to start with a good education.
Our next questioner, please. We got to get you all back to school.
We are in school. This is school.
This is school.
Kind of cool school, but it's still school.
It's school. Yeah, it's school outside of school. But I'm going to get into trouble if I don't get them back, Dr. C, to their buildings.
I'm good. I'm good. Are y'all good?
Well,
I'm
if
good.
she says it's
She's
good,
doing a great
we're
job.
Leave it. Okay. She's the superintendent. I'm just working for her, so keep coming.
Hi, my name is Baisha Lewis from Booker T. Washington High School, and my question is geared towards the actors and the producer. What was the most emotional scene to film and why?
I can answer that really easily. And I'll start crying right now. It was that last day for me on the steps of the Capitol of Montgomery, Capitol of Alabama in Montgomery, when we filmed, and that was kind of the last day for most of the cast. We filmed Dr. King's final speech, and David performed that speech a number of times for us in the heat, 100-degree weather, surrounded by background, many of whom actually were either descendants or had been on the bridge themselves. Had been with us, and we all listened to that speech, and for those few moments it felt like we were back there and that it was our victory too. And so that last scene that you see me standing there and it tells you what happened to Viola, I didn't have to act that day. I felt like she was with me having that victory again, and that it was easily the most powerful moment for me in the whole film.
Paul?
So for me, it's funny because I do a lot of TV shows and movies, and there aren't usually a lot of emotional moments. It's not, it's very emotional to watch television shows and movies, but it's not usually commonplace to be emotional on set. This movie was definitely very different. And there were so many of these epiphanies that we had. As you guys know, you're watching the movie, but generally it feels very fake when you're on set because there's like 300 people behind the camera. There's those two actors right there, but then there are hundreds of people behind the camera who are working on the movie. But there were so many moments, specifically like when we were working on the bridge, when we had 600 extras who were all dressed in, period clothes and had wigs on, and we had the horses and the smoke, and everywhere you looked, it felt like 1965. Like your vision was covered by buildings that we had to decorate to make it look like that, or hundreds of people dressed like it's 1965. And while shooting in Selma, we usually hire extras from the people who live in whatever city you're shooting in. So those 600 people were from Selma and in the surrounding area. And there were so many people that were people who had marched in that march 50 years ago that had come out to be with us and march with us on that bridge. And sitting around there's all these big gaps between where we're shooting. It takes a lot, all day to shoot, and we only shoot a small portion of the day. The rest of the day, we're trying to get ready to shoot. So there's a lot of sitting around, and people would start to get together and tell stories about, wow, yeah, when I was on the bridge, and when we're overhearing it, we're like, oh yeah, you mean just a few minutes ago? And they're like, no, 50 years ago. And there was one guy who still had the mark on his head where he had gotten hit by one of the policemen, and still has this scar. So it was, like this moment where, which happened all through the film, where we just felt like there was so much history and passion behind what happened 50 years ago, and us as filmmakers were compelled to portray that in a way that we felt was honest, that I think, for the actors, for the crew, for everyone, it was a very emotional process.
So I was emotional most of the movie, right, in the movie, being Jimmy Lee's mom. And but I do think for me that although those scenes were tough and were emotional, it wasn't the most emotional for me. I think watching the premiere in Santa Barbara with a screening hosted by Oprah, with Ava there, the African-American female director, with Bradford Young, who shot all the scenes, with all the legends there. For me, that was the most emotional, because I realized that we really have made Dr. King's dream come true. You know what I mean? Like, we're really in positions of change in cinematography, in storytelling, in a place that we were not in 50 years ago. And for me, that was just the biggest thing as an artist, to say, wow, my art really is changing lives. It really is giving a voice to the voiceless. Because no one knew Jimmy Lee Jackson's story. Like, it wasn't the masses story. No one definitely talked to his mom and did an interview with his mom afterwards. Or his, so it was, for me, it was paying honor to those who really did lay down the groundwork and really literally gave their lives. And I was just so humbled by the position that I was a crybaby for most of the time, easily.
Well, Paul, I think what was interesting is that Congressman John Lewis, when he saw the film, he cried just profusely, because he remembered everything that happened that day, that bloody Sunday, which shows what a true filmmaker you are.
Yeah, we showed it to members of Congress a few months ago in December, and it was weird because, they all know John Lewis and he's such a happy guy, and I think that they didn't know that he was like, a 23-year-old that was like a G. I mean, he was on that bridge as a young person. He didn't have, it's so weird because we're all raised in a place where society takes care of us. And generally, we feel like they're protection. I think that, one of the things that we don't talk about, like even in Ferguson, is when that protection isn't, where you feel like that protection isn't for you. But back then, there was no belief that they had protection. They walked out on that bridge under the understanding that nobody was going to protect them, that the police were actually against them, which is a whole different feeling and mindset. And that gap between Selma and Montgomery is still tough. I mean, it is nothing out there. I couldn't imagine walking it today, let alone, 50 years ago where, nobody was going to help you.
Our last two questions, sir. Three. I see. There you go. I didn't see the young lady behind you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Morgan Smith from King Middle School, and I actually have two questions. First one is directed towards everyone. How do you think Dr. King would react to today's issues and problems in America?
Who would like to go first?
I think he'd be very proud. of everything that's been done, and then he'd wake up the next morning and he'd keep working.
I think he'd be very disappointed that he fought for the right to vote, and so few of us as Black Americans register to vote. We don't vote unless there's a Black person on the ballot.
I think that, he probably would have had to shift some of his energy to us and, the people that he was leading at the time. But I think maybe we've kind of, as a mass gone astray from, fulfilling that dream. So I think that he probably would be proud that the rights exist, but would be disappointed that we don't take advantage of them.
I think he would be, I don't know, a little iffy. I think he'll be some ways, proud and honored, and then some ways a little disappointed that it hasn't gone further, that we've kind of started to settle in to some of the commonalities that we see on a regular basis. We see things that are wrong, and we don't stand up as often. So I think he will be probably yelling, like, stand up more. But I think he'll be pretty proud of you today.
Dr. C?
Wow, let me think of one thing, that movie and everything I've read and anything I know is that he was a very smart, deliberative, contemplative, complex man. And I don't think it's as simple for me to think he would be disappointed or pleased. I think he'd be struggling still with all of it, much like he did before. And while things have changed, there are just so many other issues that would have left him quite prayerful.
And your second question?
With today's issues, what suggests that the youth get involved?
I think Charity answered that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I think just sharing your voice. I think whatever medium that you have that you could share your voice, that you use it, whether that's writing, whether that's art, whether that's social media. Like, you have such a huge platform, and so if you see something wrong, speak out about it. You might get a little flack back, but guess what? People will support you because other people saw, they just weren't brave enough to say it. So I think just speaking up and sharing your voice.
Tara?
I like your jacket.
Thank you.
I like Attack on Titans. I like that show. And you know what those kids do? They work together. Yeah. So find some people that agree with the way you see things, because there's power in numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question.
My name is Vashti Bird. I'm a senior at Credit Sky King. And my question is for the superintendent. I know earlier you said that you see that there's a disadvantage for us as Black kids going to a public school, how we're set back already. So how are you going to change that?
Yeah, so I don't think because you're going to a public school you're set back. I think it's no national secret that Atlanta's public school system has struggled a lot. I mean, it has really been shaken to its core, and we must rebuild, right? So we're starting from scratch. So there's a gamut of things that we have to address. But, first and foremost, if we were to, this is another leader's phrase that I'm going to steal, but there's a little phrase that goes like this: culture eats culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And right now, if there's one thing, if I had a wand that I could just kind of fix, is a culture across the organization and even the city to some extent that is not child-centered when it comes to making decisions in education. And we have to change this culture to make it about you. You first, you every day, you when you wake up, when I go to bed, and I need everybody who's in a position, any kind of grown-up position or anywhere in between, to be thinking about how is it about my behavior, action, and thinking that is about a child's best interest first, and then I'll do the other stuff. So what I think we have to do is, first and foremost, address culture.
The second thing is I want to see elimination of any gaps for your baby siblings or anyone coming up to you from the very beginning. There's so much we can do to help kids at 3 and 4-year-old ages to be able to get a running start before they come into the system. I want to support our teachers and our principals. We want the best talent in the country, in the world, coming to work with you every single day. And we can do that in Atlanta. The city itself draws people here. But we've got to improve the working conditions of what it's like to be in those schools, what it's like to drive a school bus, what it's like to serve those meals. Every adult in the system has to feel like, just like you as a student, you are cared for, you're safe, and you're respected when you come to work and when you go to class to learn. And so, you know, when I think about what we need to do, it's a people thing. It's like trying to shift the mindset for a lot of people who I know care, but maybe we've lost our way a little bit, and we just need to bring it back to the most beautiful thing that happens every day in our city. Our children are here growing up every single day, and more are birthed and come into our system. And if we think about them first, then I think all the other little things will kind of fall into place. So I want our culture to be about you. I want it to be about your future and what's going to make your life great. And I just want you to know that that love and that attention is not just because people think they have to do it, but because they want to do it. They want to do it, and they want to see your life be successful. That's what I think will change our school system.
Great answer. And now our last questioner, last but not least.
Hello, my name is Christelle Ingram. I'm a 12th grader at Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy. My question is, how do you think the role of a woman has changed since Selma? And coming from an all-girls school, how do you think that we can be a different kind of woman?
I'm excited for the girls today. I'm worried about the guys, because I think y'all are going to run them over. It's changed a lot. Viola Liuzzo in 1965 was 39 years old. She had 5 kids and a husband, and she left her house to go fight in Selma. But she didn't let her husband know. She had to call from the road. I've spoken to so many people whose mothers tried the same thing and they got stopped by their husbands. Women did not have very many rights back then. They were told to stay at home and be quiet. So that's changed. And you can keep making that change. Because there's still, even with women, a lot of work to do. But now, just as much as back then, what you feel is right may be to be at home and take care of your family, and there's nothing wrong with that. You look within yourself and you decide what it is and you want to do and how you want to do it, because there's nothing stopping you.
There is no boundary anymore. You know, the rules are broken. Like, you could be whatever you want. I'm a mom, I'm an actress, I work in social work. Whatever you want to do, you could do. We are creatures of wearing many hats as women, and so we can do it well. I think one of the things now that we can improve on is our support of one another. So when we see a senior from the Coretta Scott King Academy get up at the mic and she's standing tall and pride, we don't go, we should all be clapping for her. We should all be saluting that she's doing something that we want to do. It's a yeah, woo! That's what I want to salute about, right? Because we're so proud of what she can do. Because in 10 years from now, she could be making the laws change. She could be doing something. She could graduating from school and making laws and heading corporations. So we got to start supporting now our future leaders. So today I salute you, Senior Coretta Scott King.
Thank you.
Very proud of you.
Well, as a graduate of an all-girls Catholic high school 50 years ago, I can say that I really enjoyed being in an all-girl environment because I didn't have to worry about the guys. I only had to worry about how good I could be. The competition was just as strong with the young women, and I enjoyed the joys of being a girl, but what I really enjoyed was getting to know my sisters and getting to know that nothing could stop me except myself.
and constantly having that support saying you can do it. So I am one of the few, I guess, who really like single-sex education, because you really get into being who you are and not worrying about whether the guy across the room thinks you're cute. I love it. So I am very proud of your school.
Yes, thank you for that question. Ava cared about women as well. That's why they're in this movie. So thank you.
So our last speaker to sign us off for the day is the woman who is making a difference in the Atlanta public school system, who came here to change things, who knows what it's like to live in Selma and to come to Atlanta and say, we're going to make this right. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Maria Karstoff.
I won't be very long because I know you all had large sodas to drink as well. So, but I think we are so honored today to have this incredibly talented panel here. Can we, do y'all know how to do the firecracker thank you? Do y'all remember that from elementary school? Remember? Remember? Y'all remember? Ready? It goes like this. Come on, put your hands together. Come on, ready? It goes up. Y'all watch, just for you. Ready? Let's go up. They deserve a big firecracker. They are rock stars. They are so gracious with their time for coming to help us. Would you just also give them a big old round of applause? I can't tell you how fortunate you are. I mean, we went across the city. How many of you have high school brothers and sisters, neighbors and friends? This is a city and a school district that raised $100,000 so that every high school student, 10,000 plus kids, can go and see this movie for free. You just have to take your ID, or you can take your report card, and those students can go to the movies. Go to my blog. It's all over the news and stuff. If you need help, your principals can help you. But you can go and see the movie for free. And I also just want to thank you for your support and helping us do that. I'd like to thank Tammy Garnes. Would you please stand? She's a mom. She's married to people at the movie, but she's made all these things possible to, help you do something that we don't ever really get a chance to do as a school system, right? Like take an issue and really try to unpack it. So I want to say first, you know how people talk smack about all kinds of stuff as it relates to who knows what in a city or in a school system. Anybody in this room who bears witness to what we saw today, you are the best, most attentive, most respectful, most inspiring, even we sang some show tunes earlier today, group of students I could ever ask to be the superintendent of. So give yourselves a big round of applause and reach behind yourself and pat yourself on the back for doing such a great job.